Hi, everyone. We will just go ahead and give it a few more minutes for people to hop on, and then we'll get started.
Well, you couldn't have better weather than what we have in Missoula.
Yeah, it is really nice.
Pretty warm, isn't it? Like 70s, 60s?
Not sure what the temperature is, but boy, the sun is really out.
Yeah, those upper 60s. It's kind of hot.
That's nice, though. I always like when it's sunny in the fall. I feel like I just need to sit out for hours to soak it up before winter hits.
Right.
All right, well, it looks like quite a few of us are here. We do have one panelist that's having a little bit of technical issues, Dena Johnson. She'll hop on as soon as she can. But anyways, thank you all for attending. I'm Holly Womack with Pine Cove Consulting. We're a Montana-based company, and we're just really excited to have on a bunch of different experts that touch cybersecurity in some way or another, and just allow for free-flowing discussion. We have a handful of prompts that we'll go through, and feel free to drop in any questions, comments in the chat as we go along. We'll answer them as we go, and we'll also have time for Q&A at the end. Before we get started, let's just go through, if panelists, if you could all introduce yourselves, who you are, where you're from, and what you do. Derrick, could you get started, please? 1 second, Derrick. Just need to unmute you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Derrick Morse. I'm with Pine Cove Consulting. Been with Pine Cove for 14 years now, I think. I'm down in Wyoming on the I-80 island during the winter. And I've been kind of doing our cybersecurity stuff for the last 3 or 4 years. And so I look forward to conversation today.
Awesome. Travis, how about you?
Will do. Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Light. I am a cybersecurity advisor with the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, just to fit security into that name as many times as we possibly can. So what we do is journey around the state and help both private and public critical infrastructure providers just have an awareness of their cybersecurity footprint and give them some tips on improving that in the future. Prior to that, I worked full-time with the National Guard, and about the last 5 years have served as the lead on the cyber defense team for the state, providing cyber incident response, vulnerability assessment, that sort of thing.
That's great. Thanks for joining, Travis. Paul Cause.
Hi, I'm Paul Cause. I'm with Missoula County Public Schools, and I'm a technologist that specializes in educational technology. That's what my master's is in and what I'm getting my doctorate, pursuing my doctorate in. And currently I'm the president-elect of the Montana Education Technology Association. where we try to join together with other educational technologists around the state and try to solve as many problems and find resources that can help us with those problems.
Thanks for joining, Paul. Dr. Clouse, if you could introduce yourself.
You don't have to call me Dr. Clouse. It's okay to call me Shawn. So I'm a professor in MIS at the University of Montana. I teach classes in project management, cybersecurity, and programming. We started a cybersecurity certificate about 7 years ago, and I teach the classes in that. And we've started a brand new bachelor's of cybersecurity just this fall. So I wrote the proposal, got approved by the Board of Regents, and now we're trying to, we have students here already taking the program. I'm from Missoula, educated in Montana. Got my doctorate at the University of Montana, my master's here, my undergrad at Montana State University, and then I have a postdoc from Washington State.
That's awesome. And we also have on Christina Henderson. She's with Montana High Tech Business Alliance. She just helped organize us, get this together. So I just want to give a huge shout out to her. She really made it easy for me and everyone else on this. So to start off, we're going to start with a cybersecurity landscape. If we could just go through some of the challenges individuals, students, and businesses in our state face, I think that would be a great place to start. If one of you would like to hop in on that.
Sure, I can take that. Just speaking from the K-12 experience and education is, we're constantly bombarded with phishing emails and whatnot. And if something gets through, it's just a chain reaction that disrupts our admin team, administrators, and just the staff in general. So, us trying to educate our end users as much as we can is a difficult challenge because although cybersecurity is growing in its importance, it still doesn't get the amount of time in that professional development that those teachers and their support staff really need. And so we always are looking for ways to fit in that time, do what we can to educate those end users, and then hopefully to reach out to CISA and other organizations like that that can really help us public entities.
That's great, Paul. I think you definitely touched on it. Cybersecurity, it really becomes a professional development aspect. I mean, what you're doing at work also can affect your personal time if you're using your work email address to sign into kind of a suspicious app or anything like that. Could be a cascading effect. How about the rest of you? Do you have any insight on challenges people face in Montana?
Paul mentioned staffing issues, and we see that a lot too, where cybersecurity ends up being maybe an additional duty, or it's just one of those, several things under the umbrella of a small or one-person IT shop. At businesses, at government agencies, it doesn't matter if we're talking public or private sector. It's a huge challenge across the state. Is just small organizations don't have the resources, time, funding, staff, trained staff to be able to adequately address cybersecurity. And then the other would be just information sharing. We have a tendency, Montanans in general, just to kind of close hold. We don't like sharing that information necessarily with the rest of the class. So we'd end up siloed a bit, and that's created some issues. I think we're getting better on that front, though.
I'll add a little bit too. I think we have some huge workforce issues, both in the state and nationwide. With there's more job openings for cyber than there are people that are qualified to take them. I think the unique thing that's happened now, IT's been online for a long time, but now operational technology from a lot of critical industries is online too. So when you put both those things online, it creates a lot of critical business risk in the state. So we have issues with critical infrastructure, power, water, transportation. We have threats to the Montana University system. Hopefully we'll talk about that in a little bit later. We are cranking out graduates in this area, but unfortunately what's happening now is that a lot of them, we're exporting our talent. Those companies that are willing to give entry-level positions, are not typically in Montana. We have some places like Pine Cove and LMG Security Missoula that hire some people. I think the workforce is a huge thing.
Definitely, and that kind of goes into our next little topic. Are there any threats or trends that you all have noticed that are really specific or unique to Montana? We are a very rural state, with a little over 1 million people in this huge, vast land. How does that kind of play into this issue?
I think we have the same kind of threats that you see in other places throughout the country. I think a unique thing that we have in Montana is people are willing to work together. So Travis and his crew have been involved in quite a few incident response things in the state of Montana. We did one for the power grid. We're doing one for healthcare. We're doing one for the Montana University system. But we're willing to collaborate at a level that other states don't have that. So our ruralness is, if that's a word, is a real strength that I think we have here. People are willing to come together. And the other thing is, not everybody is well aware of, if we get a really bad incident, especially with the power grid, who's all going to be involved. And we're trying to address that with some of these incident response trainings we're doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we do work together, and that's what we try to do at Meta. Exactly that is, there are some of those more rural communities out there, and it all comes down, to how much that individual wants to reach out or search for help. I mean, sometimes you just have strong-willed people that think they can handle things, but the truth of the matter is when they're in a very small district, they're a part-time teacher and a part-time IT director, and depending on how important those things are, things will fall through the cracks. So it's awesome that when we do have a big incident, that we do have a team that can come out and help, whether it's LMG or CISA or whoever it may be, or even Meta. But we still at Meta at least worry about those ones that we can't reach, that those IT directors that just don't want to talk, and they could have everything figured out and all good on their own, but we more worry about the students' data, the staff around them, that they may need a little bit more help than they know, or at least know of the resources that are available to in this great state that we live in. Just like Dr. Clouse was saying, it really is amazing how many things we have available, as long as people know that they're there.
For sure. I think on that point, if we could just dive into a little bit of the resources, because oftentimes it's hard for people to find new businesses that come up, or even for individuals, educators. So what have you guys found, and what do you recommend?
I don't mind taking that one. Shawn mentioned that we've been working on sector-specific tabletop exercises that are focused on cyber incident response. That we had one that focused really on the energy sector, on electrical co-ops in April. Next week, we have one in Missoula for the healthcare, for hospitals and critical access clinics, that sort of thing. And then planning for Paul's information for K through 12 incident response tabletop here, upcoming in April. So really, we do have those resources available. Those are all available at no cost. Part other than your travel there, sadly, I'm flush with federal government cash, but not that flush, where we can cover everybody's food and lodging for that. But the events themselves are free. Outside of that, we do have, especially, it's going to depend to some degree on what organization you're with. But if you're K through 12 higher education, if you're local government, state government, there are federal resources through things like the virtual training environment. There's the sector-specific information sharing that's out there. So there are plenty of resources. As with a lot of things, though, it depends on where you fall in critical infrastructure, what resources are available to you.
I can tackle a little bit of that question too. In terms of educational resources, there's quite a bit. You know, we have 3 different certificates at the University of Montana and now a bachelor's degree. Montana Tech has a bachelor's degree and Montana State University has a master's degree in cybersecurity. Cyber Montana is an outreach workforce training entity at the University of Montana. So you can get training, you can go to seminars, they have a great website. So those resources are available. I forgot one, Gallatin College, I think they're starting a cyber program as well. We got a $6.3 million allocation from the Montana legislature for cybersecurity at the University of Montana. One of them is our cybersecurity bachelor's degree has some of those funds. Cyber Montana has some of those funds. We're starting a center for cybersecurity at the University of Montana. And we're also spinning up a cyber operations center focused on the Montana University system. In my class, I'm always looking for projects. The capstone project they do is they do a cybersecurity assessment for an organization. Historically, we try to do that with nonprofits and with schools, and we've done lots of them throughout the state. We wanted to not compete with companies like Pine Cove and LMG Security, but I work closely with LMG Security and they say, hey, Shawn, it's fine to work with some small businesses. And I don't know how many people, I had to give a similar presentation 2 weeks ago to our advisory board. The Montana Department of Commerce has a program for small to medium-sized businesses where you can get up to $8,000 of reimbursement for cybersecurity measures paid to an accredited Montana cybersecurity company. So there are a lot of resources available.
For sure. I think definitely like the grants, as you mentioned, the Montana Cybersecurity Grant for Businesses. And there's a handful of federal funds too for that public education. And it's just a matter of finding those or really reaching out. I know here at Pine Cove, we always try to do our due diligence to make sure we can find those grants and resources for people that we're working with. So let's kind of just dive into the, these big threats, as we mentioned, like the critical infrastructure, education. How have these evolved? Like if we were to take a step back 5-10 years ago, what are like the biggest lessons learned? How have they evolved? Things like that. I know, Derrick, from your perspective, you kind of hopped into cybersecurity the past handful of years, but you've been in IT since forever. What have you seen?
It's really kind of advanced pretty quickly in the last, since I've been doing IT with Pine Cove for 13, 14 years, it's quite different landscape from back then. Obviously we have better technology, so we have services like the MDR services from various vendors that will monitor your endpoints a lot better and kind of keep a 24/7 overview on the devices. But the fact that we had to get there in the first place kind of speaks to how quickly it's evolving. We've got malware and viruses getting out there now that are bypassing EDR technologies and living off the land a little bit more than they had in the past. And it, the biggest, weakest link, unfortunately, is sometimes the end users without secure passwords or 2FA and phishing links. That's the biggest one right now, I think, is, the malicious links that come in, the malicious emails or websites that look and feel like a regular website. Without knowing those little telltale signs to kind of look at, it's hard to discern between the two sometimes. And those are getting more and more advanced, especially with AI coming into the fold now. And so that's kind of my thoughts on it and the overview that I've seen over the last couple of years. So
Yeah, would anyone else like to hop in and kind of give what they've seen and how it's advanced, involved?
I can jump in. It used to be that everybody thought if you're on Windows, that's the only platform that's going to get attacked, but that's not true anymore. And I think the other thing it's not brand new, but just the amount of devices that we have connected now is much more than what we had, 5 years ago, and definitely tons more than we had 10 years ago. The hackers, the sophistication is much more, or very sophisticated, where you have, some of the script kiddies from many, many years ago, but now you have organized crime doing it, and you have countries doing it that are really sophisticated. And there's great tools so they can go out and find the vulnerabilities, just like we have tools to try to protect ourselves. So thinking that you're safe is probably not a good assumption anymore.
Yep, and I'll add to Derrick mentioned living off the land, and I'm not sure if he meant living off the land techniques used by nation-state actors, but that is something that we've seen an uptick in, is these threats from other countries using living off the land techniques, meaning that they're using things that are already native to an operating system, that are native to an environment, to hide their malicious activity. To trigger that. I will say over the last 5 to 10 years that I've seen organizations make huge leaps. It used to be that you'd walk into certain small businesses and it felt almost like their workstations, their enterprise environment felt very much like your personal PC from the late 90s, early 2000s, or at least it felt like mine, where everyone's a local administrator and everyone's able to install and does install whatever they want on their machines. That is not as much the case anymore as it used to be. And really that leap where everyone's got a firewall that's managed, they're relying and outsourcing some of their cybersecurity to their cloud service providers. Everyone's using Microsoft or Office 365, that sort of thing. A lot more embrace of multi-factor authentication and certainly EDRs and other cybersecurity resources. I'm seeing those more in the small businesses than we did 5 years ago even.
That's pretty incredible. I think seems like we're all seeing, quite a different space than 5-10 years ago. It seems like parts of cybersecurity are a lot more trendy right now. There's kind of a sexiness to cybersecurity, if you will, an attraction for students that are like, we're going to be hacking into systems and things like that. But what's kind of the reality? I mean, how can people decipher what's a trend and what will actually help in preventing and creating awareness within their organization?
It's a hard question.
It is. I'll throw out that really when I'm responding to an incident, it's usually not an attack. It's certainly not a 0-day, and it's not something that's on the cutting edge of technology. It's something that's an attack of opportunity because they're not following a best practice that they should be. Something like they're not patching systems, they're using outdated, no longer supported devices or software, that sort of thing, or just mistakes like leaving remote desktop protocol open to the World Wide Web. So usually when we're responding to an incident, it's not anything, like you said, it's not anything super sexy. In that case, it's something that would have been a best practice 5 or 10 years ago sometimes. The good news is that the incidents I'm responding to right now seem like they're in something of a lull. I will add, from the federal side, we're hearing things like post-quantum cryptography initiative. So you want to talk things that sound sexy or sound cool, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and tech that's going to blow all of our current encryption standards out of the water soon. So there's definitely need for people who are really smart and leaning into that front.
For sure. I know there's a number of conferences that I've been to where the most packed presentations have been about post-quantum because it's so appealing, but we're 5-10 years out. But what's crazy is a lot of huge organizations like Walmart are investing in that tech now. But when it comes down to, your local business, your local school, even most of the employees, that's really not what they're going to touch within their career.
I think one of the things we're seeing, especially with big business, Fortune 500 and above, they realize the risk that's really there. There's about 2,000 new vulnerabilities every month. The average cost of a breach for a Fortune 500 company is $9.4 million. The average amount of time that they're in there is 277 days. So especially big companies, it's like, well, let's spend some of this 9.4 million that we could potentially spend to try to reduce risk so that we're better prepared. And then I think the other new development is AI. The hackers can use it, and we can use it to prepare ourselves, to help protect ourselves as well. Especially if you're not up to speed where you should be in terms of governance, it's pretty easy to go to ChatGPT and say, give me a draft of an incident response plan. Don't believe anything that ChatGPT says to you. So that's your draft. And then you have to go through and, sharpen that plan. But at least, the governance is a big problem with lots of organizations.
Definitely. With all these new technologies, how have you seen it affect the school districts, Paul? Because I know students are going to want to use them, right?
Yeah, it seems
not just the teachers.
Some districts are, really embracing it. It all depends, of course, on funding. But now that everything's going browser-based and more affordable, if not free for most end users, it's kind of nice to see that excitement about technology and about certain things. But then, from an school IT side of it, we've got to make sure that, P2 data is protected and that we're setting our students up for success. And one of the main, again, challenges that is educating our teachers and their support staff, because we still have this kind of divide of, the younger generation is catching up as far as them as teachers, but you still have this older generation of teachers and admins there that have no idea of the technology that the students are using and have no idea the capabilities of it. And so it's challenging to hear both sides of it. At least Missoula County Public Schools, we're a little bit more, we want it to come, especially AI. We want, just like Dr. Clouse said, it to be used in a way that is useful, just like we use calculators, just like we use typewriters. It's the next stage in how we can utilize technology to help us reach our potential faster and more thorough. So it's been challenging. There's a lot of other technologies like interactive flat panels and things like that, augmented reality and stuff like that, that are going to be exciting once the standard public school can utilize it. It's just right now what I see is it's hit or miss. Some, they have it at one school, they have it in one classroom. Some kids don't even get access to it. The infrastructure of the network isn't as good to handle multiple classrooms utilizing it. So we hear a lot of ideas and stuff, but Montana still, at least Missoula County Public Schools, is a little bit behind on just taking on everything.
For sure. I think, our lack of access to broadband is huge, which makes it hard for people to train themselves, train their employees, even have students being trained. So I know, Dr. Clouse, you work with the students interested in cybersecurity. They're ready to study it, major in it. What about beforehand? How do you think we should be training the younger generation of Montanans before they get out into the workplace, whether they want to go into cybersecurity or not? Or even should we be training them and helping them?
I think we definitely don't want to wait for higher education to solve the problem. I think the sooner you get people, or especially kids, engaged, the better. I didn't start using spreadsheets until I had already graduated from college, and my wife was a high school teacher, and she was teaching the same things that I was teaching at the university. So, we definitely need to advance. I think especially when you look at technology, there's some killer apps, like email's a killer app, the browser's a killer app, Facebook and social media are killer apps, and the amount of time for adoption took a little while. But if you look at what happened with AI, that just hit the land in November of last year. And the adoption of that has been amazing. And, you know, the first time I addressed it in my syllabus was for this semester, and I want my students to use it. But I also want them to know that, you know, it can lie to you. And so you have to have a level of knowledge to, you know, really triangulate and, hey, am I going to believe what I'm seeing here? And we have so much of that. And we actually had a guest speaker here on Monday on narrative intelligence that from the university or from Ole Miss. And, you know, looking at, you know, it's so easy to get stuff out, you know, especially with what's going on in Israel right now. What do you believe? Because there's so much misinformation that's put out, as well as, you know, what's real. And, you know, it takes a level of skill to, you know, at least triangulate and find more than one source that's saying that thing. And, you know, teaching, you know, our students in all levels that, hey, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And you need to be a critical consumer of information. You gotta you make some judgments. Is this true or not? And unfortunately, you know, the technology that can like and love stuff, that's not really people doing it. You know, it happens faster than what normal people do it. So a lot of that stuff, you know, really rises to the top in social media. So we need to be careful there. And the Center for Narrative Intelligence is trying to put together some tools with AI, you know, to help you decide, hey, what's real here and what's not.
For sure. It's definitely a manual process right now. I know from the Pine Cove side, and Derrick, you could speak to this. We always get questions every day, multiple emails. Is this email real? Should I click on it? Like I clicked on it. I gave them my information. Was it real? Derrick, could you speak to that a little bit? Like what you see in your day to day and maybe some preventative tips as well?
Yeah, again, I think it goes kind of back to, you know, paying attention to the email address that it's coming from and they're finding ways around that and have for a while too, but paying attention to those and the tone of the email, the minute details, really, you know, they're not necessarily always going to spell the words correctly or put the punctuations in the right places. With AI, that's getting harder to find just because of the fact that that can write out a script for you fairly easy to make it sound pretty believable. And then, of course, with social engineering being a big deal right now, that's an even harder thing to combat. Just you need to make sure that you're talking to who you're talking to, make sure that, you know, if they're calling you in and wanting you access to your computer, make sure that it is who they say it is, whether that's coming up with the common phrase that you use if it's somebody that you talk to on a regular basis, like a tech person, or somebody to that effect, coming up with some ideas or ways to confirm that you're talking to the real people.
Definitely. And I know we've covered a lot about the human element of cybersecurity. You know, that's really the weakest link is each one of us. But there's a whole other side to it as well. And that's really the infrastructure that our businesses are using and things like that. Travis, I don't know, do you guys have any advice on updating systems, things like that? Or are you really into the training aspect?
No, certainly. I mean, from updating systems, that is a thing you should do, definitely. is patch your systems. CISA does offer some more of the technical features, services, especially the vulnerability scanning, web application scanning. And for those, really, the idea is you sign up and you get a continuous scan of any external facing IPs, any external facing web applications, and you get a weekly report generated. What's nice about that too is it then opts you into what's called the pre-ransomware vulnerability notification program, where if we see that your system has a vulnerability that's being actively exploited by bad actors out in the wild, I turn around and give you a call within 24 hours. It's one of the few things that I'm required by law to do is that notification that, hey, you have a critical vulnerability that we are being seen exploited out there. on other systems around the country. So definitely something worth signing up for. Less so on the updated systems, but certainly you don't want to use things that are out of date. You want to make sure everything's patched and get those get that awareness of where you're at and track known vulnerabilities. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the concept of a POAM or a plan of actions and milestones, but the idea is that it's just a tracker of the vulnerabilities that you know about. Hey, we have this old Cisco switch that we know is no longer supported by Cisco. Here's our plan for it. It may take a few weeks, may take a few months, but at least we have that documented, and everybody in their organization who looks at that POAM knows about it.
That's great. How about you, Paul, within the K-12, where I know oftentimes you guys are working within a set budget. At times it can be hard to update that infrastructure. Like, what advice do you have? What have you seen?
Yeah, it's really having good communication with your admin team and your superintendent. It's really important to stress, especially also with the board, as much as you can, stress the importance of that those patching those vulnerabilities and setting yourself up to not just play defense but to be more proactive. It seems that a lot of schools that I've had experience with, especially smaller districts, they're just in this perpetual mode of playing defense and reacting when something happens versus trying to be more proactive and taking the steps needed to, like Travis said, to really get those things going and to keep up to date on all those vulnerabilities. CIS does a great job of sending things out weekly, and so does Pine Cove. I know you guys do that. It's a great feature, but again, it just people have got to be actively engaged in receiving those things and being adamant to doing that. And what we face in the K-12 environment is sometimes you just don't have the staff to dedicate the time to be that on top of it. And again, you kind of playing this defensive mode of just reacting when something happens, so that's what we're trying to get out of by taking part in various different programs that CIS offers and other things, having that emergency response plan so that when something does happen, the chain of events, and really just trying to educate everybody, because like Dr. Clouse said, there's so many more things now that are on the network, whether it's boilers, it's HVAC, it's alarms, it's security cameras, and sometimes those aren't even in the IT department, yet they need IT's help to get those set up, and yet who's the admin of those systems? Is it the IT director who has got so many other things going on there? Is he really going to give it to the head custodian who doesn't have any training in that area? So it's like hard who you give admin credentials to and who you have to trust with those things in the K-12 environment.
For sure. I think a whole other layer to that is bringing your own device, right? BYOD. Everybody having cell phones and their personal computer and an iPad and then this and that. And I feel like within each part of cybersecurity, whether you're taking a course or you're a business owner, that presents a pretty big vulnerability. How do you guys combat that? What do you recommend? Can we just dive into that?
I have a few that come to mind. Proper network segmentation, which I have. That's another bit that I've seen vastly improved over the last 5 years, is organizations actually segregating, whether logically or physically segregating their traffic. That's the public BYOD type, whether it's employees' personal devices or whether it's guests, from official, corporate or government-owned equipment. So network segmentation, zero trust architecture, and complying to connect. So I don't see as much in the comply to connect realm yet, but the idea is that you have some service, some software usually, that will put you in sort of a quarantine subnet until you have the patch levels that are needed to get onto the network. So if you have an outdated version of your Windows OS, Windows 10 needs some updates, Adobe needs some updates, that comply to connect solution is forcing you to be quarantined until you remediate that. It is, though, giving you access to the World Wide Web just for that. So that's definitely something for that BYOD concept to work. especially since so many cloud services now too are allowing you to connect your personal device to that service and do work from it. So something to keep in mind.
For sure. How about in those university aspect, Dr. Clouse? What do you see? Because I know students are using their laptops, their phones, and when they're enrolled in a cybersecurity program, do you talk about that at all? You know, could you just dive into that for a minute?
Yeah, we definitely do talk about it. You know, universities are they're a really difficult place to secure. Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody's got a personal computer, especially
Mhm.
all students have one. We have wireless networks. We have wired networks. We're trying to do, you know, what Travis had talked about, you know, network segmentation. Especially in my class, I bring somebody in that hacks a Wi-Fi password. And when they see that, they see, you know, they put up a rogue Wi-Fi hotspot, but you also see the real ones on there while they're hacking. And we have a Grizzly guest area that's truly meant just for guests that are coming to campus. And then we have Eduroam, which is a secured Wi-Fi network, and most students are logging on to Grizzly Guest, which with your own device, that's probably not a really good idea because the hackers can get in there too. They can't get into Eduroam. Yeah, we also have this thing called academic freedom where, you know, there's some websites that you could go to legitimately for research that in, you know, the K-12 environment and a lot of public libraries you can't go to. So we have to be careful, a little careful about, you know, what proxy server settings will be set up. But yeah, it is a nightmare to truly secure a public institution of higher education.
Definitely a balancing act.
I'm curious for Paul's take on this. I had an incident at a school a few years ago that I responded to, and the IT administrator there and I were discussing credentials and password strength and everything. And he asked, "Well, how do I get first graders to remember a complex password?" And I have some ideas, but I want to kick it over to Paul for to see if what his answer would be for that.
So we have a service, it's called Clever, and basically it's a little badge that the kids get that's got a QR code on it that has that student thing. So they basically, I think it's third grade when they're expected to start remembering their password and typing it in without their Clever badge anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, my thought was more making sure that whatever those first grade, second grade accounts can do is not much, and definitely not anything more than what they should do.
Oh yeah, everything goes off of that Clever kind of portal that gives them access to the iReady, their different things. And then we have different segmentations for elementary, middle school, high school. Then we have a BYOD that we just set up this year. And then we have a guest account like Dr. Clouse that was just kind of for anybody that comes in from outside the district that needs to connect.
I will say it doesn't just apply to first and second graders, but the more you can encourage users to not have to remember passwords or complex passwords and go more towards the passphrases or even passwordless, like you're saying with those badges, seems to be the better answer. You know, really so much of this is trying to reduce that human factor as much as you can.
Yeah, good point.
For sure. I think still what's crazy to me is those first graders, second graders, they can use technology better than most of us. I mean, wow, like they could go on, they know YouTube, they know what to search for, like they know the applications. It's pretty crazy how nimble they are with it.
Yeah, and that's the hard part is that, again, I was telling about that age gap. You have these individuals that have, you know, just very limited tech skills yet their students are far superior than them. And so, you know, when they walk out of the room and they've left their computer on, you know, and they didn't close it, there's just those little things like that where some teachers just don't understand how quick these kids can be, you know, or hijack the screen that's mirroring a display and play something, or putting a flash drive in the back of a TV that's doing a PowerPoint show, and all of a sudden it's a new PowerPoint show. And luckily we have cameras now that can hopefully catch these kids when they do that. So it's limiting how much, criminal activity, I guess you would say, is happening with technology, but it still happens.
For sure. I know we're just about at time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you think of anything later, feel free to send them my way. You can just respond to the email you all received. But I think lastly, we went over pretty big topics. Prevention is key, training, and reaching out to those resources. And just trying to focus on that offensive mode instead of that defensive. Think before we quit for the day, if all of you could kind of just go around and give your main takeaway you'd like people to know about.
I guess I can start. Technology is not going to solve this problem for us. It's a two-prong approach. People have to have a pretty high level of knowledge to protect yourself in today's computing environment. So, we need to work on it from both angles. Technology will keep getting better, but it's not going to totally solve it alone. We need to elevate the knowledge of the users.
For sure.
I'll start with an anecdote, and that would be in September, we saw both the Caesars Entertainment and MGM get hacked through social engineering. So the most basic types of approaches compromise those Fortune 500 companies to in sums in the tens of millions of dollars, that just through a 10-minute phone call to each. So those best practices, whether you're following the NIST best practices, whether you go to Center for Internet Security's CISA controls, just go through and follow those, and you're going to protect against most things and not be a victim of Ocean's 1 like Caesars Entertainment was.
For sure.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of bounce off what they're saying is it really is that educating as much as we can get out, because a lot of the things that I think are happening to an average user are annoyances. They're getting spam, they're getting a website hijacker, but it only takes one incident in that person's life for them to really be either financially crippled or their identities taken, things like that. And so I think is whatever we can do, of course, we try to do it in the K-12 environment with the students and our staff, but it just even the outside community approach, if there was just a little bit more proactiveness in educating everybody. I mean, it's just something that's become more apparent and more dangerous in our society. And I think that, as everybody stated, it's only going to get more and more sophisticated. So unless we get sophisticated along with it, we're going to be left behind, and more incidences are just going to keep arising.
Definitely. How about for you, Derrick? What's your takeaway for the day?
Yeah, I agree with everybody. The educating people on the basic stuff is really key. Just paying attention and making sure that you're clicking on the right things and responding to the right emails, and yeah, just following really the basics is for the best we can do right now.
I think I'll also add, since I don't hold a technical position, if you think you've clicked on a suspicious link or gave your information, reach out to your IT person, your security person. Just reach out. I mean, often they'd rather hear about it immediately rather than waiting. I know Derrick, I always send him emails where I'm like, hey, is this okay? Is this not okay? And he never yells at me too much, right?
And if you did click on, it's okay to admit it. We'd rather find out that you admit it, you did it, so we can go about it than the day later when it's spreaded and now it's a much bigger problem. So it's okay to admit things. We'd much rather hear it.
For sure. We do have one question. Their question is, what recommendations do you have for levels of cybersecurity insurance and the approach that should be taken for remediation or for breach planning with them? I don't know if any of you are willing to tackle that question.
Was that assurance or insurance?
Insurance.
So they're asking about what do you do with your insurance to make sure that you're protected?
And remediation and breach planning for the cybersecurity insurance.
Yeah, so just from my experience in the K-12 environment, you definitely want to go in there either hopefully yourself as an expert or bring in an expert that's outside of the insurance, because I'm just seeing that sometimes they don't have a fully understanding of some of the things they want to implement or do in the environment that they're trying to make it happen. And so it's, you know, like our two-factor authentication for students. I mean, how are we going to, you know, necessarily, that was a big thing. We can't have thousands of flash drives. We can't have every kid have a cell phone, things like that. So there was just certain things that they would bring up that we'd have to be like, whoa, we're going to have to, you know, more game plan how we're going to tackle that particular aspect of it. So that's only advice I would give is just, you know, either yourself, you know, hopefully you've had some expertise in that, or bring in someone that does, so that they can be more of a realistic game planning to those different things that they're going to want to do.
I think also on that point, we often see it's not about checking all the boxes, and oftentimes a business owner or a superintendent is all about checking the boxes on a cybersecurity insurance form. They want to get the A, the 100%, but it's really a lot more than that. There's so many technical issues that could arise. It's so complex that it's more than that. Dena Johnson, she was supposed to join us today, but had some technical issues. I would say reach out to her. She is a great resource. She's based out of Billings, Montana. She does a lot of like business advising, things like that. And I know from speaking with her, she also recommends reach out to somebody, you know, get an advisor to help you with the cybersecurity insurance process. It's evolving quickly too. Each year there are more requirements. Then the next year there are even more requirements, and it's getting harder for businesses and schools to really stay up to date. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Derrick, because I know it's something you see a lot.
Yeah, I think it's, you know what, it is a difficult conversation because the insurance companies don't, at least from what I've noticed, don't necessarily grasp what they're asking sometimes, some of those requirements. And so trying to figure out how to make sure that you're covered the way you need to be covered while making sure that technology is supposed to be beneficial and not a hindrance. And I don't feel like we want to make it harder to use technology. We want to make it easier to use technology, but stay protected at the same time. And sometimes the insurance companies are asking a bit more than maybe is needed, or maybe not. I think that's kind of a decision that you have to make with the stakeholders that are involved and with the insurance company to figure out the middle ground.
Yeah, when you take the step to buy insurance, you know, you're transferring your risk, the risk that you see for cyber. You're transferring that to the insurance company, and they're in the business of managing risk. So I've seen companies that, you know, their insurance provider was going to cancel them because they weren't doing a lot of the you know, have the governance stuff in place, so they know how they're going to handle a breach, and you know who they're going to reach out to. So yeah, definitely that industry is evolving fast because they've had to pay a lot of claims, and they're kind of making organizations do what it is they should do if they're going to transfer their cyber risk to them.
Right.
For
That
sure.
you as a business need to do your due diligence to make sure you keep in compliance with whatever the insurance company is asking for. I'll add too, though, that the cyber insurance, that's not a control. It might save you some dollars if you have some kind of an attack or suffer some kind of a breach, but that is not a control.
I think that's a great point. Well, that's the only question I saw, but I just want to thank you all for attending and hopping on. Thank you to the panelists. I really enjoyed hearing from you, learning from you all. Have a great rest of your Thursday afternoon, everyone.
You too.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.